opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrein in Tel Aviv. I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrein in Tel Aviv. I did get the call through, though. I have called and conceded the race.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network. Nice to see you there, Camellia. Glad you're enjoying the America 250 intro. Sad day. Somewhere on a highway in northern Kentucky this morning, Thomas Massie is driving home to his farm, and the Liberty Movement is online acting like it didn't see this coming. I saw it coming. I said it out loud. On October 19th of last year, I posted on X, and you can go read it right now. I said, I don't want Massie to lose, but it's a huge mistake for people in our position to be acting like he is perfectly safe. And if Massie gets Justin Amoshed, then we are well and truly effed. And guess whose fault that was going to be? Well, that was 7 months ago. I said that the best path for libertarians was reconciliation with Trump. I said the movement needed to stop picking this fight. I said we cannot lose Massie the way we lost Amash. And the libertarians told me to shut up and sit down. So this morning, I'm not going to sit down. No, I am sitting now. You should sit down. $34 million. A presidential endorsement, the Secretary of Defense on the stump. Everybody had it out for this guy, except for the Democrats. Election eve, character attacks, and the verdict in the most expensive congressional primary in American history is that Ed Galrein is the Republican nominee in Kentucky's 4th. And the highest rated Liberty Republican in the United States House is done. And people are acting shocked. They should not be shocked. This was not an ambush. This wasn't a steal. This wasn't a bought seat from AIPAC or Israel. This was an operation that came and destroyed a man who didn't do everything right. He didn't do anything right. Now, this morning, I'm going to tell you exactly what Thomas Massie and his supporters did wrong. Not because I wanted him to lose. I didn't. I spent 7 months trying to prevent it. But because the Liberty Movement in the United States has a catastrophic habit of processing every defeat as if it was inflicted entirely from the outside, and in doing so, it never honestly accounts for the wounds that it opened itself. That's right. This campaign is dead. Not from AIPAC or Israel or Donald Trump or even Ed Galrein, who didn't even have to run or debate. This is a death from self-inflicted wounds. We're going to talk about the donors, the outside money. We're going to talk about that PAC, right? But outside money doesn't win in a race in a district that gave Trump 67% unless the door was already open. That door was open. Libertarians opened that door. MAGA just pushed us through it. Now, Thomas Massie had beaten the Trump machine in 2020, going 81-19. Same district, same voters. He won then because his people trusted him. He lost last night because something changed, and it wasn't his voters. This is the honest accounting of what happened last night, and it starts with who he let stand next to him, what they said, why he voted against the one big, beautiful bill because it did too much to secure the border, and why that made the attack ads easy to write and impossible to answer. This morning, we'll hear from Judge Andrew Napolitano, depending on how he feels about it. I don't know what he'll say. He may not choose to comment on it. That'll be up to him. We'll see. If not, we'll discuss his column. But then at 8:30 a.m., the man who was the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee in 2024 and then walked out 9 months later, I wonder why. He's now announcing at Freedom Fest this July a national campaign he says has never been attempted in 250 years of American political history. Is it libertarian nationalism by any chance? And on a morning where the Liberty Movement just lost its most important seat in Congress, the questions that we will ask are not abstract questions. They are real, they are serious, and no other show on any side of the aisle is going to talk about things the way that we're going to talk about things with the knowledge that we have here. So if you want to see some incredible bonus content this morning, if you've been loving those 250th anniversary intros, then you'll love our bonus content. Make sure that you drop those Rumble rants early and often. And of course, we'd love to have you support us by clicking the like button. If today is the first time that you've ever watched the Wake Up America show, click the follow button as well. Kim McCurry, welcome back, Kim. Good to see you again. So let's talk about what happened last night and what the Liberty Movement gave away.
Concession speech said something despicable, anti-Semitic, nasty, gutter politics, right at the end. What a way to go out. He said, I would have called Ed Galrine, but I had to find him in Tel Aviv. There was an undercurrent of anti-Semitism in this race on the Massie side. There's been an undercurrent of it in his career, unfortunately, and it really came out in an ugly way tonight. And I think it needs to be stated, acknowledged, and condemned because it was pretty despicable.
Thomas Massie lost last night, and the people who funded his defeat are waking up this morning with $34 million worth of proof that you can spend enough money and take out the person that you want. AIPAC's United Democracy Project spent $4.1 million. The Republican Jewish Coalition's Victory Fund, $3.9. MAGA Kentucky, this is the PAC run by Trump's former campaign manager, Chris LaCivita, with Paul Singer's money underwriting it, $7.5 million. Miriam Adelson's linked PAC, Christians United for Israel, covering every available billboard in the district. The President of the United States flew to a logistics warehouse in Hebron, Kentucky in March to personally tell registered Republicans that their congressman was a disaster. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was there. $34 million, a presidential endorsement, cabinet officials campaigning, and election eve allegations dropped on Rumble by Laura Loomer, and it worked. Ed Galrine is the Republican nominee in Kentucky's 4th, and Thomas Massie's going home to his farm. Now, before we do anything else, I'm going to sit and we're going to look at the specific cost of what was just lost, because the Liberty Movement has a tendency to process defeat by immediately pivoting to the next fight. And we are going to pivot to the next fight soon. But first, let's take an honest account, because it feels like we never really honestly account for what the previous fight actually contained. What was in Thomas Massie's congressional career is not replaceable. All right, not this week, maybe not this decade. The Prime Act pilot program made it into the Farm Bill, Section 12-114, and it passed the House on April 30th. Now it's going to go to the Senate, where Chairman Bozeman wants a markup before summer, and where the current Farm Bill extension expires September 30th. Now, Massie is the author of that provision. It came to my attention when Lauren Boebert and many others were out trumpeting Thomas Massie's success in getting his Prime Act into the Farm Bill. Well, it's not exactly the Prime Act, but it is a pilot program for it, right? Massie was the author of that provision. Right? He introduced the underlying bill in every Congress since 2015, and the Senate companion is sponsored by Rand Paul and Angus King. And the Senate will now mark up a farm bill without the House author of its most significant food freedom provision in the chamber doing oversight. Now, that's not fatal to this provision, right? This Prime Act pilot program that Thomas Massie got on this bill. It can still pass, but think about this. The institutional knowledge that Massie has about this bill, the floor relationships that he has or had, the ability to call members and explain why a custom slaughter pilot program matters to working families in rural America, that now walks out the door with Massie in January. The Senate needs 7 Democrats to clear the filibuster, and the person who spent 11 years making the case for the Prime Act, which we desperately need in this country, is going to be back in Lewis County feeding cattle, while Senate staffers try to reconstruct his argument from his notes. 1 week before the primary, the House unanimously passed Massie's NICS Data Reporting Act. Unanimous. A gun rights transparency bill that requires the Justice Department to publish demographic data on every background check denial, who gets denied for guns, why, at what rate, broken down by race and income and language. And it passed the U.S. State House without a single opposing vote. And that bill is now in the Senate with no House sponsor to shepherd it through, no floor presence to push it forward, and an incoming freshman congressman from the 4th District of Kentucky named Ed Galrein, who's never mentioned it in any campaign document, rally speech, recorded interview. The bill will almost certainly die in committee now. And 5 million Americans per year will continue to be denied their Second Amendment rights by a background check system that nobody in Congress will be forcing to account for its own error rate. The war powers work in the House? Done. Massie sponsored the House's concurrent resolution on Iran every time Democrats brought it to the floor. The resolution asserting that the President of the United States cannot wage indefinite war without congressional approval under Article 1. It failed 3 times in the House, 7 times in the Senate. Every time it failed, Massie was the lone floor vote explaining why it mattered. Every time he was one of 2 or 3 Republicans willing to go on record. Warren Davidson of Ohio was usually with him. If you don't know that name, definitely someone that you need to start to get to know. Rand Paul was always with him in the Senate, of course. Now the House side of that coalition loses its most persistent voice. And the next time that a president, this one or any future one, decides to launch strikes without a declaration of war, there's one fewer person in that chamber willing to stand up and say, Congress makes law, Article 1 means what it says, and the executive branch is not a monarchy. But the chilling effect from this result is not hypothetical. It's already underway. Every Republican member of Congress who watched Thomas Massie get hit with that $34 million in presidential endorsement and lose is calculating right now whether independence is survivable. Conservative Review Liberty Score gave Massie a 96 in the 117th Congress. Club for Growth gave him a 93 lifetime score. The Republican Liberty Caucus gave him 102 in their most recent index. We've had the Republican Liberty Caucus on the show talking about it. It's the highest score in the entire House. They gave him bonus points for legislation he sponsored that never received a floor vote. The average House Republican on that same score, 34. The gap between Massie and the median member of his caucus was 68 points. Right, that gap doesn't get smaller when you remove the 102. It gets larger in the wrong direction. The next closest scores to Thomas Massie on that card belong to Andy Biggs in Arizona, Andy Biggs in Arizona, Eli Crane, Scott Perry in Pennsylvania, Chip Roy in Texas. And these members have their own primaries, by the way, their own donor pressures, and they got their own calculations to make after what happened, watching what happened last night in Kentucky. The 2026 primary season just sent every liberty-minded Republican a message written in 9-figure spending. And the message is, compliance is the price of survival. The Constitution says Congress makes the law. Article 1 is the first operative sentence of the Constitution. The debt is a math problem. The math doesn't care about party affiliation. The federal government has no business inspecting a 7-employee slaughter facility that never ships across the state line. These aren't just talking points, guys. This is what we are actually fighting for. This is the real to make our society better. Instead, we turned a primary into a question about Israel. Thomas Massie, an MIT-trained engineer who registered dozens of patents, went to Congress because he looked at the federal government and saw a machine running bad code. Now, replacing that with a retired Navy SEAL whose entire platform is alignment with the president doesn't improve the output. It makes the machine run faster towards the same wall. The bottom line, before we take our first break this morning, $34 million can defeat a 14-year incumbent with a 102 on the Liberty Index in a district that gave Trump 67%. In a closed primary, remember, with registered Republicans. You couldn't just show up to vote if you were a Democrat or a Libertarian or an independent or you'd never voted before. The most expensive congressional primary in American history just set the price of independence. The Liberty Movement paid for this result. And after this little break, we're going to talk about exactly how we got to this point and whose fault this actually is. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. We'll be glad and thankful to have you here. Make sure that you click the follow button if today is your first time watching the Wake Up America show. We'd love to have you be a regular guest. Mondays through Fridays, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time is the Wake Up America show schedule. Make sure that you click that follow button to come back and join us.
I was going to ask a question until the very end. Owen said that there's a MAGA cult now that Trump is ahead of. And I guess the question is, the biggest split now would be headed by Tucker Carlson having like nicotine-driven demon visions, and Candace Owens talking about like Bridget Macron's phallus and committing calumny against a widow and Erica Kirk, I guess, and like the guy you just interviewed.
Love the word calumny, by the way.
Dan Bilzerian talking about whatever the hell he's talking about between playing poker and fucking tons of women, whatever. So I guess the question is to both of you, I guess, which side is better, Trump and his people who are actually, effectuating change, in our favor, or, the people talking about Bridget Macron's dick and all that?
I mean, that's kind of a bit of a straw man, so I don't really know what that has to do with this debate.
I don't see Candace Owens in South Carolina, campaigning for Mark Lynch.
Or even debating her views. At least Owen debates his views.
I did campaign for Mark Lynch. I was here.
No, but I'm saying, most of the people...
Who's actually doing something for the cause? Is it Candace Owens, or is it Donald Trump? No one to blame but yourselves. We're going to talk about that this morning, but I do want to remind you guys that we have bonus content available to unlock. So if you like what you're hearing, even if it's painful, then you guys should check out forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. Our 250th anniversary collection available. If you're still a patriotic American like I am, get our Join or Die shirt. 250 years strong. So here's the fact that ends this argument before it starts. In 2020, Thomas Massie went toe-to-toe with Donald Trump, the same Trump who called him a disaster for America, and Kentucky said he should be thrown out of the GOP entirely. And back in 2020, Massie won that primary with millions of dollars in AIPAC spending in that race, and they couldn't unseat him. Look it up. Tens of millions of dollars spent to take out Thomas Massie in 2020, and yet he still won. He won 81-19. 81-19 in the same district with the same voters. The Trump machine came for him in 2020, and his people sent it home. So when you hear people this morning blaming last night entirely on Trump, or entirely on AIPAC, or entirely on the $34 million in outside spending, ask them to explain 2020. Because the money won't explain it. The presidential endorsement doesn't explain last night. Those same weapons, AIPAC, Trump, outside spending, all of those same weapons were pointed at Massie 6 years ago, and he laughed them off and handily defeated them. What explains last night is simpler and harder to hear. Thomas Massie changed, and his voters noticed. The man who won 81-19 was a quirky, MIT-trained engineer who seemed to genuinely believe everything he said. Who showed up to work every day and put bills out there and ground out results in these unglamorous legislative fights that many of them never trended on Twitter. But the man who lost last night had become something different. He turned himself into, did I say it, a podcaster? Taking shots at myself here. He tried to turn himself into a national media figure who looked more comfortable on the Theo Von podcast than on the floor of the House. Got a Wolfman haircut, new young bride after his wife died, scandals all over the place. That wasn't the Thomas Massie of 2020. It wasn't the same man. All right, he used to pick fights on terrain that nobody cared about, right? But it didn't harm him then. The one big beautiful bill. Let's talk about the one big beautiful bill, right? The centerpiece of the Trump domestic agenda. Tax cuts, border security, energy production, the legislative fulfillment of what Trump ran on, and what Republican primary voters in Kentucky sent their congressman to support. Thomas Massie voted no. right? And I don't think he voted no because it spent too much, actually, not just because it blew up the deficit. You can argue that, and that's a defensible liberty argument. But Massie voted no because, according to Massie, the bill did too much to secure the border. Too much border security. In a district that gave Donald Trump 67%. In a Republican primary with registered Republicans who put immigration at the top of their list of concerns. Right? And that's a man who has spent so much time surrounded by the national libertarian media ecosystem that he started to believe his own propaganda. He lost the thread connecting him to the actual human beings in Lewis County and Boone County who were counting on him to show up for them. And then when those voters walked into the booth yesterday and asked themselves whether Thomas Massie was still their guy, that vote was waiting for them. Now, the outside money that was spent, it did not create that vulnerability. Right? Miriam Adelson didn't vote in that district. It was Republican primary voters who made the decision. Right? The outside money, all they did was find that vulnerability, exploit it, and then spend $34 million making sure every registered Republican in the 4th district knew about it before polls closed, before polls open. And that's what outside money does. It doesn't necessarily manufacture doubt out of nothing. Right? It takes the doubt and it turns it into a 30-second ad. Now, as much as it might feel good for many people to say, "I told you so," here is a list of tweets going back months and months. You can see, pull it from a grok, do a broader search from Pressy. Here we go. Broader selection, warning about the risks, the feuds with Trump and MAGA, the amoshing of Thomas Massie. Mid-period warnings. Here we are, November 26th last year. Trump versus Massie, bad idea. Massie and Paul are not like Marjorie Taylor Greene. We need to bring this war to an end. The best path is reconciliation. Otherwise, it's a guaranteed bloodbath. Here's November of last year. Our job should be to reconcile Trump and Thomas Massie for the greater good. October of 2025. Warnings like, "I don't want Massie to lose. This is a huge mistake. If Massie gets a mosh, we are well and truly effed, and we can't lose Massie like we did a mosh." I have been warning for months and months and months that this was going to destroy us, that Thomas Massie was going to be a victim of overconfidence from the last people who should be confident in electoral politics. It doesn't matter if you are the incumbent with $1 billion on your side. It doesn't matter if AIPAC is endorsing you as a libertarian Republican. You run like you're 10 points behind and never, ever think that you're safe. Never, ever. Your overconfidence is your weakness. Your faith in your friends is yours. Yeah, spending. Too much spending on the border. But it wasn't just the one big beautiful bill vote, right? It was the coalition that attached itself to Massie's brand while he was busy building a national profile, while he was busy being king of the podcasts. Thomas Massie was out there courting the absolute worst people in politics. Look at this. Look at this. This was from May 13th. They thought that this was going to help Massie. Here he is with his opponent not showing up, an Israeli flag right there. There it is. It was the coalition that attached itself to Massie's brand. They used him, right? And it was his failure to separate himself from that coalition before it defined him in the minds of persuadable primary voters. Now, Thomas Massie's original argument, or at least the 2020 Thomas Massie argument, was that it was a coherent constitutional foreign policy position that he's held since 2012, right? No foreign aid, no nation building. The appropriations process is not a global welfare system. Those are legitimate right-wing criticisms of his foreign policy, especially regarding Israel. But those aren't the arguments. That's not this. That's not that argument. Right? But the argument that he originally was making back before the Wolfman glow up, those were legitimate right-wing arguments, and those won him 6 consecutive primaries, including 2 where AIPAC spent millions against him, and he still cleared 70%. So why did the money not work then? If it's an AIPAC argument, why did the AIPAC money not win before? He was winning. But then Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and the Groyper Network decided to make this race their race. But their argument isn't constitutional non-interventionism. Right? Their argument is ethnic grievance. Right? Tucker spent the past year flying to the Middle East to film content about Christian-Muslim harmony in Palestine and framing Massie's foreign policy position as being fundamentally about Jewish influence over the Republican Party. Thomas Massie allowed that, even encouraged it. Candace Owens built a subscriber base on the proposition that everything is compromised and nothing can be saved. And the only honest conclusion is despair, nihilism. Nothing means anything. Nothing matters. And Candace showed up to this race because the framing that Thomas Massie was allowing other people to write for him and encouraging, and eventually wrote for himself, suited Candace Owens' content calendar. Now she gets to walk away with all the millions of dollars that she made using Thomas Massie, using the Libertarians who allowed themselves to be used, and she just gets to discard us. She gets to walk away and pretend like nothing happened, but we're the ones who paid the price for that. The moment that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson became the highest profile voices in Massie's corner, the moment that Massie traded MAGA for groypers, that was the day that AIPAC's ad team stopped working on the policy arguments that Massie was making, and they started working on association arguments. Association arguments are easier to make, and they're harder to answer. Yesterday on this show, we had one of Thomas Massie's top lieutenants, Tiffany Cianci, to answer the question, why did Thomas Massie not only take a picture with a guy wearing an American Reich shirt, but hug him and then invite him to her house? Well, the answer was that she invited him to his house. Some of you might have actually seen that commercial that was playing in Kentucky 4. If you live in Kentucky, you definitely saw it. Massie was walking into a hotel with AOC and Ilhan Omar. I mean, listen, that was funded by people whose connection to American conservatism begins and ends with their willingness to write large checks. But the reason that ad had traction is that the coalition visibly surrounding Massie in this race gave it the context for it to land in. AOC praise, Ro Khanna praise, New York Times praise, Marjorie Taylor Greene praise. If Dave Smith and Nick Fuentes and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens show up and want to endorse your campaign, I don't care how many fucking likes you get on your tweets. Tell them to fuck off. If Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur want to support you and you're running in a Republican primary, tell them to fuck off. Okay? Republican primary voters in Northern Kentucky aren't stupid. They voted for Massie several times, even against the endorsement of Donald Trump in previous races, even against the money in previous races. But Massie and his supporters spent all of this time claiming guilt by association. Well, he's with the Jews. He's with AIPAC, or they're with the neocons. It's the neocons. The neocons are why we're losers. But they never thought that guilt by association might be pointed back at them. Oh, well, why are you being supported by, are you getting $7,000 from Israel? Well, funnily enough, Sam Marouk, a Texas-based businessman who says he was born in a Palestinian refugee camp, gave, ironically, $7,000 directly to Massie's campaign, the legal maximum. His wife gave $7,000. His daughter gave $7,000. His 2 sons gave $7,000 each. Wow. $35,000 from one Palestinian-American family routing money to a Republican primary in Kentucky. Okay, well, so we're all just going to talk about AIPAC and that lobby, but we're not going to talk about this money coming in. This is the same Sam Marouk who also donated to Justice Democrats, to David Hogg's Leaders We Deserve PAC, and to a super PAC whose board includes someone banned from LinkedIn for comparing Israel and Nazi Germany. So this Marouk character, he's not a constitutional libertarian. He didn't read Massie's CBO analysis and decide to write a check. Wow, this guy's really serious about the spending and the debt. Sam Marouk has an agenda. And then he found the vehicle for that agenda. The Liberty Movement accepted the money, accepted the association, and now we live with the result. And then there was Epstein. Now, the Epstein files transparency work, that was real. And that mattered, right? Getting that act through a discharge position, 427-1, forcing the DOJ to release 3.5 million pages, putting Les Wexner on the record, right? That's legitimate oversight. And we supported that on this show. The problem, of course, is what it brought with it. Right? The moment that you attach Epstein to your brand in 2026, do we need to say you don't? It's pretty clear you're not going to get a clean conversation about government transparency. What you get is the entire internet conspiracy ecosystem that spent years calling specific living people pedophiles on the basis of a name appearing in a document that they hadn't read because, let's be honest, they were probably high on drugs. The DOJ itself had to clarify that 4 of the 6 names released by this had no actual connection to Epstein. Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? Well, when you're called a pedophile, there is no innocent until proven guilty in this society. These people, they were in a photo lineup that was assembled for unrelated purposes, but the damage was already done. These men had been called pedophiles by millions of accounts, and Massie never separated himself from the people doing the calling clearly enough to make the distinction stick in a 30-second ad. Instead, Massie spent the last 24 hours of the campaign trying to pretend like Trump might still support him because he'd endorsed him back in 2022. Donald Trump took to Twitter yesterday for the first time in months specifically to refute that lie. You have to trim the hedges. You have to clean up your movement. I said all of this before the primary for months. On October 19th of last year, I posted this publicly. Go read it. If Massie gets amoshed, then we are well and truly effed. And guess whose fault that's going to be? And then I said the best path for libertarians was reconciliation with Trump. I said we cannot lose Massie the way that we lost Amash. I said this is a fight, not a fight we should be encouraging. But the movement kept encouraging it. Massie's sure to win. He's won before. We're going to win by double digits. Oh, wow. Richard Barris's poll on Twitter. Look, he won a Twitter poll. He's definitely going to win. So here we are. And now the question is whether the one man left who can still course correct is paying attention. Rand Paul is the last one. Justin Amash is gone. Thomas Massie is gone. The Ron Paul congressional era, that's long gone. Rand Paul is what remains of the last tradition, of the entire libertarian tradition at the federal level, with real institutional power and a real national platform. Rand Paul's message is strong. His record is strong. His principles are documented. But his alliances are shaky, and the knives are already out. Laura Loomer, who did the data dump against Thomas Massie the week before the primary, is now saying that Rand Paul is next. And he will be next. And if we don't learn our lessons from this, he will follow the same path as Thomas Massie.
Senator, just quickly, do you have any reaction to Massie's loss? No? Senator, just quickly, do you have any reaction to Massie's loss? No?
This is the message directly to Rand Paul. Learn the lesson that Amash and Massie paid for. The coalition that you allow to attach to you becomes the story told about you. Pursue transparency. Demand fiscal accountability. Name the actual crimes of people who actually committed them. But the moment that somebody in your orbit starts calling a private citizen a pedophile because their name appeared in a photograph, cut that person off publicly and do it fast. Because the liberty movement in this country cannot afford a third lesson on the same subject. Now, the bench beyond Rand Paul is real. Let's look at it. You got Chip Roy of Texas, Warren Davidson of Ohio, Andy Biggs of Arizona. Right, these members exist, and they're in Congress right now. And the movement's immediate job should be to protect them from the playbook that just removed Massie. The playbook is now documented. We now know what they're going to run against us. Candidates with deep local roots who cannot be reframed as performers for podcast audiences, for Pakistani groypers, coalitions that are built around constitutional arguments rather than ethnic grievance and Muslim-backed anti-Israel money, and a firm public separation from the Tucker Carlsons and Candace Owens, who are going to attach themselves like barnacles to any race where the framing suits their content calendar, and then leave the candidate holding the consequences when the actual votes in the Republican primary are counted. I want to talk about the future right now and why I think it belongs with one man whose name we shall reveal after the break. Don't go away. This is the Wake Up America show. You're watching the 4 Liberty Network. "'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from 4 Liberty shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at 4libertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. George Yearger dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them. Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at 4libertyshop.com.
In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up, he keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than
well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian.
And always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one
regarding your wedding, your recent wedding, which, by the way, congratulations. What do you make of all that? And he's obviously supporting your primary opponents. I mean, what kind of retribution are you facing?
You know, my wife told me, she said, "I told you so. We should have invited Donald Trump. He's mad that he didn't get an invitation."
Sounds like the wife should have been running for office in there.
So we're taking it with a grain of salt. He's being a bully or trying to be a bully. And they're trying to beat me here in Kentucky. But here's what's interesting. The people financing this campaign consist completely of 3 billionaires, and they're all in the Epstein class. In fact, one of them is named in Epstein's phone book. Not the secret files that the FBI is keeping, but in Epstein's phone book. So it's a small world. Dogs don't bark at parked cars, and we are winning. I'm not tired
my
of
dogs are
winning
kind of
yet.
dumb. They do bark at parked cars. Good morning. Rise and freedom. The Liberty Movement normalized something that should never have been normalized. It came straight out of the Thomas Massie campaign and contributed directly to the environment that made this race losable. The Liberty Movement allowed itself to become a host ecosystem for people who aren't interested in transparency. They're not interested in the law. They're not interested in constitutional government. They're interested in calling powerful people pedophiles, or anyone who disagrees with them pedophiles. And those people use Massie's legitimate oversight work as the vehicle to do that. You know, there's a difference between these two things. The first thing is what Massie did, forcing a discharge petition, getting the Epstein Transparency Act signed into law, putting Les Wexner on the record. Like, this is real work, right? This is institutional accountability pursued through legitimate legal channels, and we supported every bit of it on the show. The second thing, because two things can be true at once, is what the ecosystem around that work actually did, which is take every name that appeared in any document connected to the word Epstein and call that person a pedophile on social media to millions of followers without actually reading a single page of those files and without any interest in doing so. Right? These things aren't even in the same category. And the failure to draw that line loudly and publicly and repeatedly is one of the reasons Thomas Massie is home in Kentucky today. The DOJ itself, not Massie's opponents, not AIPAC, the Department of Justice had to come out and clarify, clean up the mess that 4 of the 6 names released by Ro Khanna and had no actual connection to Jeffrey Epstein whatsoever. They had been in a photo lineup that had been assembled for years ago for completely unrelated purposes. 4 out of the 6 people. And by the time the clarification came out, those 4 men had already been called pedophiles by millions of accounts across every platform, right? Not accused of financial crimes, right? Not accused of dirty deals, right? Pedophiles with their names and photographs attached by people who had proudly not read the documents and had no intention of doing so because, of course, reading the documents and getting the Epstein files out was never really the point, right? Now, do I need to explain what being called a pedophile actually does to a human being? Because I think that the liberty movement has been online so much that it's lost track of what words do in the real world. If you call someone an anti-Semite, right, that's ugly, right? That's a serious charge. That can do real damage. But a man who is accused of anti-Semitism can fight back. He can produce his record. He can point to his relationships. He can make the case in public, and reasonable people will evaluate the evidence. That accusation is rebuttable. But a man who doesn't, the man who's accused of child sexual abuse doesn't get that. That accusation doesn't work the way other accusations work. It doesn't respond to evidence. It turns off people's brains. It doesn't respond to clarifications from the DOJ. It doesn't respond to retractions or corrections or apologies from the people who made it, if they ever come, which they never do. Still no apologies from Ro Khanna or Thomas Massie for revealing those people. You can spend the rest of your life proving you had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein, and there will still be people who remember that tweet and called you a pedophile and never saw a correction. Right? That is the specific mechanism by which the liberty movement handed its opponents a weapon and then got surprised when it was used. Oh my God, we didn't mean... Republican primary voters in Kentucky, church-going, Christian Zionist, Trump-supporting, working class, registered Republicans in Boone County and Lewis County and Bracken County started seeing ads that connected Thomas Massie to an ecosystem that had been publicly and loudly calling people pedophiles for months. And voters didn't know the details of the discharge position. Right? They didn't know which names were legitimately in the documents. Or what they knew is what the ads told them, that the loudest voices in Thomas Massie's corner were people who traffic in the most toxic accusations in American politics. And then those voters made a decision yesterday. The same people who spent months screaming about foreign influence and the corrupting power of outside money, the same people who were furious that AIPAC was trying to destroy a good man's reputation, had absolutely no problem destroying the reputations of men who had not been charged with anything, not been indicted for anything. Hell, anybody that disagreed with him got called that, right? This is the black pill business model. Your outrage is their product. Your certainty that everyone in power is a monster, that's the subscription model that they run on. And they will burn down everything that you love. Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson will destroy everything that you love, not because they want to win, but because if they did win, winning would end the show. Right? This isn't complicated. You don't get to rage about the politics of personal destruction when your side is calling private citizens pedophiles with no evidence. You don't get to demand fair treatment from the media establishment while your most prominent allies are doing to innocent people what the media establishment did to Nick Sandmann. And if you're a liberty activist and you shared one of those posts, if you hit retweet on something calling a man a pedophile without reading the document, then you have to sit with the possibility you were part of what happened last night. Not the only part, maybe not the biggest part, but a part. And the movement doesn't get better until the people in it are willing to have that conversation honestly. Just like you can't teach democracy to Iraqis, you cannot teach excellence and discipline and championship to libertarians. True reform must come from within. Here's the path to American greatness.
For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline.
There it is. Marco Rubio at that Munich conference. He said something that should be on the wall of every liberty organization in America. He said, we have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. All right, that's not a man who's trying to get clicks on Twitter. That's the language of somebody who's decided that the project, that's not somebody who's, trying to monetize their views. All right, that is somebody who is not saying complacency is the only way to fight. Let's go be Democrats. Nothing's going to win. Nothing matters. All right, I've disagreed with Marco Rubio on lots of things. Common good capitalisms, his view on executive authorities and a blank check, right? But if he runs for president on that platform he's been building, American renewal, Western civilizational confidence, the explicit rejection of managed decline, I'm here for that conversation. Because you know what? I think the liberty movement needs allies who actually believe this country has a future. Rubio acts like he believes it. And that matters more right now than ideological purity on a checklist. And anybody who tells you otherwise, probably has already started their Substack about why 2028 is hopeless too. But no matter what happens to Rand Paul or Marco Rubio or anyone else, from my Revolutionary War ancestor Isaac Wade to myself, Austin Wade Peterson today, I will keep hope alive on this show. As long as there is life, there is hope for liberty. And I've pledged my life and my fortune, my family's fortune, and my sacred honor to the cause of liberty. I pledge it to the American flag and to the republic for which it stands. And as for me and my house, and all of you Peterson's patriots out there who are with me, I say, it ain't over till the fat lady sings, and as far as I'm concerned, the revolution fucking continues. We'll be back with Judge Andrew Napolitano on the Wake Up America show to hear his take on what happened last night. This is the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than
well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian.
And always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
The left in America tells us not to have kids to save the planet, but in Cuba, they stopped having kids because the state destroyed the earth.
Collectivism doesn't create justice. It creates shortages, corruption, and power for the few. I've not just seen it, I've lived it. My family escaped it. Now the same failed ideas are being sold to a new generation. I'm here to expose the lie and defend liberty. From Cuba to Argentina to the United States, the freedom movement is rising. Cafecito Libre is the exile voice of economic truth. Cafecito Libre, premiering March 3rd as part of the For Liberty Network, only on Rumble.
"'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. I am your host, Austin Peterson. We're glad and thankful to have you here. For nearly 20 years, I have championed the cause of limited government, constitutionalism. I remember a day sometime around 2007, I was standing in a subway in New York City like a crazed street preacher, handing out Ron Paul placards and telling people to read a book by a man that would one day become my boss and my friend. The author of that book, A Nation of Sheep, was so inspirational to me that I put every ounce of energy that I had to try and get him his own show on Fox News. That show became Freedom Watch, where for 2 wonderful years, my good friend Judge Andrew Napolitano and I fought against the enemies of individual liberty in all of their forms. Every form of tyranny over the mind of man, as Jefferson would put it. That man, the modern Thomas Jefferson, joins us on this show live every Wednesday. For the good days, for the bad days, he stays true north for liberty. Judge Andrew Napolitano, good morning, Judge. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sorry that it's such a sad occasion for us.
Yeah, well, it's very sad because of the setback to the career of Congressman Thomas Massie. I say setback because he has so much brilliance, intellectual honesty, and personal courage. I'm sure he'll pop up somewhere else soon, and he still has another 7 or 8 months to go in this term. But for his career to go down because the president is a thin-skinned bully with rich friends, none of whom has ever even been to the 4th District of Kentucky, to spend tens of millions of dollars to defeat this guy because Donald Trump can't stand having somebody point out his violations of the Constitution. It's just wrong. It is morally wrong for Thomas Massie to go down and suffer like this. I'm sick to my stomach and I couldn't sleep last night. I guess there's a little bit of Pollyanna in me, and I really thought, oh, he'll win. He always wins. He's such a good human being. I even went to Mass to pray for him while they were counting the votes. For naught.
Judge, we were together working at Fox during the Tea Party years. The very first episode of Freedom Watch was specifically a Tea Party summit. You brought together Sarah Palin and Ron Paul and Rand Paul. And at that time, Thomas Massie and Justin Amash were just starting to pop up on our radar. But these libertarians formed a spearhead of power and authority that lasted for years until MAGA took over, the Tea Party died, and it became, a sort of right-wing populism that is in some ways libertarian, but in other ways very hostile to libertarianism. Is Trump really the primary motivator in all this? Is there any self-reflection that we libertarians could say? Were there missteps made along the way? Because I can say honestly to you, Judge, that when I ran for president and I ran for Senate, that I made some really critical errors and mistakes. Of course, I only know that now because hindsight is 2020. But what happened? What went wrong, Judge, from the day that Ron Paul and Sarah Palin were talking about the Federal Reserve on Freedom Watch to where we are today? What happened?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you what happened. I mean, we largely have not had a national figure to crystallize these arguments the way we did in the Ron Paul days. Thomas Massie, for all of his assets, never really succeeded Ron Paul on the national stage, and Donald Trump, for all of his faults, and he has many, rather brilliantly tapped into the pro-life movement, even though he's not pro-life, the anti-tax movement, even though he's not anti-tax, the anti-war movement, even though he's not anti-war. He just pulled the wool over the eyes of so many of these people, many of whom were sick of the Bush years for Republicans, sick of the Clinton and Obama years, and they fell for this stuff. He has been an enormous letdown to the MAGA people that are intellectually honest, because he doesn't stand for anything unless Benjamin Netanyahu wants it, or his neocon advisors push it on him. I mean, look at the war in Iran. Not only is it immoral and illegal, it doesn't even work. They didn't even have a legitimate military strategy. The military strategy, which was dictated by the Mossad, which is an intelligence agency, not a military agency, said, oh, just kill the leaders and drop some bombs and the people will revolt in the streets. What a profound misunderstanding of history, and what a profound misunderstanding of the Iranian culture. And Trump, because he's a simpleton and subject to the importunments of Netanyahu, bought this stuff. Now he's got himself in a war of his own making that he can't seem to get out of. However, he still is able to command a majority of the minority, enough Republican votes to oust those who challenged him. But to think of it, the Congress is a better place for someone like Thomas Massie. Any legislature is a better place because AOC is there. A legislature should have all views articulated before it. It should not operate on the whims of leadership. The Republicans will vote the way this idiot from New Orleans tells them to vote. The Democrats will vote the way this guy from New York tells them to vote. That's not a legislature. A legislature explores all ideas and considers all options from progressive to libertarian, and then it votes. Without Massie, there is nobody there in the House to express these views. Rand Paul does so in the Senate. He's a little bit more judicious, a little bit more political, a little bit more, he holds back a little bit more because I think he has ambitions that he doesn't want Trump to stand in the way of. But without Thomas Massie, the House of Representatives is a weaker, more totalitarian institution.
Judge, you've said several times on this show that you know Donald Trump, you've spoken with him. You even had a situation where you had told him, I think, to remove a part of Section 702. Please remind me if this is correct. But the point of this was that Trump usually does what the last person who spoke to him says. In other words, he's not an ideologue like you and I, right? We have complicated ideological positions for why we support free trade or all these policy things. But you said that Trump typically does what the last person who spoke to him was. You spoke to him to remove a surveillance provision, from what I understand. If that's true, Judge, then is there an alternate universe where Rand Paul and Thomas Massie could have maintained their relationship with Trump been the Trump whisperer, had better tactics, stayed close to Trump, and been able to influence him in that more libertarian direction? Or do you think this was inevitable?
I think it was inevitable. I think Trump has surrounded himself with neocons. I mean, there is nobody in the administration who whispers things to him like free trade, civil liberties, pro-life. I don't know what Vance says to him, but whatever he says, it doesn't seem to get through. I don't know that Senator Paul or Congressman Massie would have performed the services that they have as well as they have if they had been in Trump's inner circle, because you're right, he doesn't have any ideological views. He's just interested in power for power's sake. He's like a child in that he's interested in immediate rather than long-term gratification. I mean, if a Democrat succeeds him in 2028, he'll probably be indicted for insider trading, and the immunity Supreme Court decision won't protect him because that's not a core presidential function. I mean, there's just so much darkness going on that the political demise of Thomas Massie is a symptom of it, not a cause.
Now, Judge, Trump had endorsed against Thomas Massie before. AIPAC had spent millions of dollars in the races before. Back in 2020, during the COVID pandemic, the Trump administration aimed their fire and their fury at him, and he won by 80 points. So what changed?
I guess the amount of money that they spent and the personal involvement of the president. I don't think Pete Hegseth violating the Hatch Act a day before the election, which actually caused Congressman Massie to think that they thought they might lose. Why else would you send the Secretary of Defense there? But I think it was just a combination of Trump and Mrs. Adelson. I don't know how much money was spent, but it was tens of millions. It was really an absurd amount of money for a congressional primary. It's the kind of money you would spend on a gubernatorial election in a big state like New York, rather than on a primary in an essentially rural area.
I'm
not that well connected with Kentucky politics. I don't know if Rand Paul was involved. I don't know if Mitch McConnell was involved. I couldn't answer those questions for you. So my answers are not based on an adequate knowledge of the local scene.
I understand, Judge, and thanks for saying that. So Rand Paul is next. They're saying that Rand Paul is about to get the Thomas Massie treatment. If you're like me and other libertarians in this country who don't want to lose the last vestige of libertarianism in the U.S. Senate, if you were advising Rand Paul this morning, what would you advise him?
I would advise him to be himself, to be intellectually honest, and start raising money.
Yeah,
somebody came through with I don't know who it was, some PAC came through with a lot of money for Congressman Massie toward the end. I don't know if it was too little, too late, but it was a huge amount of money. And because it was a PAC, to this day, we don't know who it was.
So now that the knives are out for Senator Rand Paul, we have to find a way to effectively circle the wagons and to try and find new leaders of liberty that will go forward and be able to respond to the concerns of voters. Some of this, I think, is an unwillingness on libertarians' part to understand what motivates Republican primary voters. In some ways, I feel as if we haven't sort of, I guess, trimmed the hedges of the garden of modern American libertarianism. So we've sort of dodged the responsibility of having to contend with some of the more boring issues. I think what I see, Judge, at least from an outward perspective, is that Republican voters, they don't think the same way that we think, in a way. And what matters to us politically is for them the personal. So in some ways, of course, people aren't going to the ballot box because they like someone's policies. They do it because they like their personalities. How do we contend with that? How do you contend with that in the body politic when clearly people are not going to the polls because they care about a voter's policies, but whether they find the candidate attractive, whether that candidate is someone that they want to sleep with, as ridiculous as it sounds, Judge. These are real concerns that libertarians who, if they run for office, if they choose electoral politics, they have to be concerned about. How do we contend with that?
Well, at the risk of getting too personal about this, the libertarian movement needs somebody like you. Young, attractive, fearless, intelligent, and articulate. You touch all the buttons, and maybe there are others out there, but you foremost come to mind, not just because we are friends, but because that's an empirical observation that almost anybody can make, and your age is just the right age.
Judge, when I went to a high school, when I was running for the Senate, the group of high school girls who were there told me that Josh Hawley was more attractive than I was, so I definitely lost the battle on that one. But these are the kinds of silly things that we do have to contend with. These kind of the things that you and I like really don't care about. I mean, I was attracted to Ron Paul because of his message and his ideas. And other people, I remember Republicans at the time, their complaints was that he sounded like a crotchety old man. And it's kind of like we're almost like aliens on this planet, Judge.
Yeah, we are. We are, because we are basically very deep thinkers who believe in the sovereignty of the individual, the primacy of the individual over the state. Most people are just concerned about what is the government going to do for me next. They don't know the Constitution. They don't understand the Constitution. Ron Paul, like you, had the ability to explain these things so that the beer and pretzel set can understand it. That's probably what the libertarian movement needs now. Maybe that person is Thomas Massie, as he will soon be liberated from his obligations in the Congress. I don't know the answer to that. I haven't had a chance to talk to him. I don't know what he's going to do next. I know there are people that want him to run as an independent, which would pretty much assure that Mr. Galrain would lose. But that would really make enemies in the Republican Party, and that's probably not a Thomas Massie-like thing to do. But I'm sure he could become the next Ron Paul. I don't know if Ron was in the House when he ran for president and crystallized the movement, or if he had left. I think he was still in the House, but it's a different era now with social media, and Thomas Massie could easily make the most of it. Maybe we need a new third party, and maybe Thomas Massie is the head of that third party. I mean, the Republican Party is nothing but a bunch of sycophants for Donald Trump. The Democratic Party is moving farther and farther and farther to the left with every tick of the clock, notwithstanding efforts by leadership to tug it towards the middle. So maybe a free market anti-war party is in the offing, and maybe Thomas Massie is the leader of it.
Well, I'll tell you this, the Libertarian Party is, as we speak, currently having a major fight over whether or not there should be a dress code established, because now that someone has proposed that there should be a dress code, the battle that the Libertarian Party is engaged in is on whether men should show up cross-dressing to their event. So, and I use that to illustrate that it just feels sometimes, Judge, that even the people who share our ideas have no concept of how to get those ideals across and are fighting a battle that is far and away from the battle where the actual fights are happening right now.
Right.
I mean, I was in 2016 when I ran for president as a Libertarian, Judge. A man got up, stripped naked on stage, and started dancing around in front of the audience. How do you build a Libertarian movement with people like that, Judge?
Yeah, I did not know about this cross-dressing stuff. The Libertarians, the ones that approached me and you and Dave Smith a few years ago, they have devolved into irrelevancy. They are so far removed from a thoughtful, Ron Paul, or an articulate Thomas Massie, or an attractive Austin Petersen, they are just so far removed from that that they are irrelevant and not appealing to the public. I would think the dust will settle and Thomas will come up with some idea. He's filled with energy, filled with ideas, not defeatist. All the horrible things they said about him, he never said one negative thing about this guy Gowron, except that Gowron was afraid to debate him.
Judge, any words of warmth or hope or, kindness to the young libertarians who listened to this show this morning or feeling very defeated this morning?
Well, they shouldn't feel defeated, even though I feel that way. That will pass. And they should continue to articulate fearlessly their ideas. They should continue to educate themselves in the books that we all have read that helped form our thinking. And they should find this new Ron Paul, and I'm going to suggest that it's a prime candidate for that position in our movement, in our lives, is the great Thomas Massie.
Judge Andrew Napolitano, who do you have coming up on your show, Judging Freedom, Judge?
I have the great Max Blumenthal, who just eviscerates the government of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I have Phil Giraldi, the CIA agent that Bush threw out of the office. I have Matt Ho, one of those brilliant Marines who's now fiercely anti-war after having fought in the useless, fruitless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I have Aaron Mate, whom you should know, a young, articulate Canadian journalist, a progressive, but one who shares many, many of our ideas.
Judge Andrew Napolitano, host of the Judging Freedom podcast and Big Brain Time here on the Wake Up America show every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Central. Judge, bless you, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Austin. All the best.
Thank you.
This Congress nigga has been laying pipe.
Sensational.
This is Thomas Massie. He murdered his wife, and since then, he's been on demon time. It all started with Lauren Boebert.
Why is everybody so horny here?
She let Brother Massie hit almost immediately.
Nice.
Then he met this bitch, and things started getting really freaky. She showed Loomer hundreds of messages about everything from smashing Congrossi to some Diddy blood shit that happened at the airport. Apparently, Brother Massie took a bunch of Viagra and made the TSA workers touch his pine cone. That shit is brazy, and it's all coming out right before the biggest election of his career. Is Thomas Massie a sexual patriot? Will the Coon Fairies bless him on election night? Hit the repost button.
Listen, if you can't laugh at yourself, Kermode, if you can't laugh at yourself, guys, other people will do it for you. Blackpilling is easy. Anybody can look at the debt or the border or the surveillance state or the clown show in Washington and say, well, we're cooked. It's all over. Very brave, very original of them, right? You and every guy with a podcast and a microphone in his shoe closet like I am. The real move is building options while everyone else is doom scrolling. See, last night I got myself a little bit of insurance to guarantee that no matter what happened last night, that the revolution would continue. That's where expat money comes in. This is my sponsor who I endorse. They help people legally build a plan B, like my buddy Todd Starkey. He headed for the hills, went on to Panama, got himself a second passport, residency options, offshore banking, international investing, the stuff that you want to figure out before the emergency hits or Rand Paul goes down if he does. Right now, they're giving you a free report just for signing up. It's free, no guessing. No panic Googling at 2 a.m. Go to expatmoney.com/Austin. That's expatmoney.com/Austin. Sign up. Get your free report today. Doom is cheap. Options are power. Coming up next, the former Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate, Mike Ter Maat, on what happened last night. He's already released a statement this morning, and it doesn't look good. We'll talk to Mike Ter Maat about that and Freedom Fest in Las Vegas. This is the Wake Up America show, and you're watching the 4 Liberty Network. Of our Lord, 1801, President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from 4 Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at 4libertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again.
Picture this. It's 1776. Thomas Jefferson is hunched over his desk at Monticello, ink-stained fingers, writing the most radical document in human history. Do you really think he was sipping Starbucks? No. He was drinking something bold, something black, something brewed strong enough to fuel a revolution. That's the spirit behind Founding Flavors, our signature line of liberty-fueled coffee. No soy froth, no climate guilt, no corporate slogans. Just real coffee, inspired by the men who wrote freedom into existence. Every cup is a quiet protest. Against mediocrity, against tyranny, against bad coffee. So this morning, skip the globalist brew. Grab something worthy of a free man's sunrise. Founding Flavors. Now brewing at 4libertyshop.com. Imagine bringing George Washington back to life. Just to explain that in 2025, men can get pregnant, waving an American flag might offend someone, and our government is $34 trillion in debt. But that's not all, George. We have drag queen story hour for toddlers. Pronouns are mandatory. And Harvard can't define woman. Oh. And we send billions to Ukraine but can't fix potholes in Ohio. You know, just normal modern empire stuff. I'm sure he'd be totally cool with it. Right after he finishes reloading. He didn't cross the Delaware for this nonsense, but you can carry on the fight with gear that would have made King George cry. Shop bold, shop free, shop 4libertyshop.com.
Thanks for sticking around. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show, and that's on the For Liberty Network. Make sure you click the like button if today is the first time that you've ever watched the Wake Up America show. Click the follow button as well. 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. That's the Wake Up America show schedule, and we're sticking to it. Well, Thomas Massie lost his primary by double digits last night, and now libertarians in the United States are left picking up the pieces. My next guest is the man who was the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee back in 2024, but he walked out the door of that party less than a year later, joined the GOP. He has an announcement that he says is unprecedented in 250 years of American political history. Mike Ter Maat joins me now live on the Wake Up America show. Good morning, Mike, and thanks for coming back. We appreciate you.
I appreciate you letting me back on. It's a joy to be with you once again. You look good, Austin. It's a tough day, but good to be with you.
It's a very tough day, Mike. And before we get into the myriad reasons why I think this happened and get your feedback on it, I just want to get your clear, straightforward, unadulterated, pure take on what you think happened last night and why.
I think this was a loyalty test. I think it was a punishment for having failed the loyalty test for Donald Trump. Loyalty is not just paramount, but the only thing to a certain extent when it comes to public policy. The president is no ideologue. This had nothing to do with conservatism or libertarianism or any other ism. This was a matter of Massie not having voted with Trump, and had a lot to do with Massie pushing the Epstein files and trying to get as much disclosed as possible, either in a fashion or at a pace that the White House was not comfortable with. And for this reason, the president was not having any more of Thomas Massie.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I've heard that from a lot of libertarians this morning. So I hope you don't mind if I play devil's advocate a little bit, Mike. It's not because I'm against libertarians, but my concern is that libertarians seem to be incapable of self-reflection, and we love to blame everyone else for the problems that seem to be of our own making. Is there anything that you think Thomas Massie could have done differently other than bending the knee? Because he did oppose Trump in 2020 during the pandemic and won with 80 points. Something changed in Thomas Massie from then to today, didn't it? Is there anything that we could have done better?
Undoubtedly, there's always things you can do better and ways that you can articulate your message better. If there's a fail, it is in threading the needle, right? Thomas was obliged, if he was interested in keeping his seat, he was obliged to adhere to his libertarian principles, his conservative principles, his Republican principles, and at the same time make it clear that this has nothing to do with the president himself, that he's, not anti-Trump. He doesn't have to be pro-Trump. For most of us, the idea is, you don't have to fall in line behind any one particular individual, but nor do you have to position yourself as an advocate of Trump derangement syndrome. It's just a matter of how you feel based on your principles about each vote at that moment. And I think that Massie could have done a better job of articulating that. Whether that would have changed anything or not, I don't know. But I do believe that a number of folks in his district believed that Massie was per se anti-Trump. And even, whether it's true or not, Trump was able to make that case. Right? You dump $15 million into a single congressional district, you can probably make almost any case you want to. But Massie would have had to have inoculated himself by pointing out that he's got nothing, nothing in the way of a problem with President Trump. He did point out that he voted with Trump 89% of the time, which sounds like a big number, but it's the other 11% that bothered the president.
Well, but here's the problem with the thinking on this one, because the argument went from Epstein transparency to Donald Trump is part of the Epstein administration. So what I was hearing from conservatives in the Republican Party is that libertarians supporting Thomas Massie were accusing Donald Trump and all of his associates of being satanic pedophiles And I can't help but wonder if you attack people in your party for being pedophiles, if that might not have had something to do with it. Smearing the Trump administration with the pedophile accusation. That's a pretty tall smear, and it's one that I saw used quite frequently, Mike.
I agree with you. There may be some exaggeration there, but directionally, I totally agree with you. I don't think that Massie said that the president was a pedophile. But to your point, there were folks who did say that. To your point, there were folks who did say that. And Massie did not distance himself sufficiently from that, which I think is your point. You're not trying to say that Massie did call the president a pedophile, but
only that he insinuated it.
You need to distance yourself from that because there is no credible evidence that the president committed a crime or did anything wrong that might be revealed by the Epstein files. And allowing the implication to be out there that he did, I think, was overplaying and frankly misplaying a hand. I'm all about, I think you are too, having as much disclosure from the Epstein files as possible, right? But that doesn't mean that to make that happen, it would be a good idea to imply that the people who are roadblocking you have some weird interest other than just seeing things differently legally.
Well, that's what I was hearing from my conservative friends in the Republican Party, and I know you've joined me here in the GOP. You probably talk to them a lot as well. Is that they could withstand Thomas Massie's vote on some of the issues that they thought were conservative priorities. They could tolerate that. They voted to send Thomas Massie back to Congress overwhelmingly in 2020, but the situation had changed by last night. And Massie had sort of traded his allies. He had traded his MAGA allies for this sort of Frankenstein coalition of far left Democrats like Ro Khanna and others, groypers, even neocons, Mike, were rooting for Thomas Massie at the end. They were all out because, of course, these people were anti-Trump. I mean, just that coalition alone would make any Republican deeply suspicious, Mike. Isn't there a misstep in there somewhere if the Democrats...
I think there is.
Yeah.
No, I think that there absolutely is. Look, it's one thing to work across the aisle. It's one thing to co-sponsor with a Democrat to build a coalition. That sounds terrific, right? But when you're positioning yourself as Ro Khanna's friend, right? When you end up on major cable network,
if the New York Times is writing a glowing endorsement of you the night before your campaign, something's probably off.
Something has gone in the wrong direction. Yes. Something's gone in the wrong direction. You don't want to appear, by the way, not just for political purposes, but for policy purposes. You do not want to appear in the mainstream media more often with Ro Khanna than with Donald Trump, right? You've done something wrong, and I was not aware that there were neocons rooting for Thomas.
Yeah, the bulwark.
That is a weird thing, and I understand why. If your coalition is based on anti-Trumpism, you have made a wrong turn.
Yeah, they're asking that question there. What neocons were for Massie? Take a look at the podcast coming out of The Bulwark. The Bulwark is kind of like the arch neocon, the Never Trump movement in there, which was just this bizarre situation in the last week of this confluence of people. But Mike, I confess, maybe I'm a bad libertarian, but I actually like a lot of people in the MAGA movement. I get along with them really well. And, I call myself these days I call myself a libertarian nationalist. I really like people like Vivek Ramaswamy. He calls himself a libertarian nationalist in the GOP. But what we saw last night, one brand of libertarianism getting destroyed in the GOP, but a different brand of libertarianism, a MAGA adjacent form of libertarianism, which got 80% in the Republican statewide primary in Ohio. So is there really two different libertarian movements here, Mike, in a way?
I don't think so. Time will tell. I don't think so. I just don't think that going after Massie had a great deal to do with libertarianism. I think it had everything to do with what you just described, putting together an anti-Trump coalition, misplaying the Epstein files hand that Massie was dealt, or that he dealt himself. I think that there were communication missteps and alignment missteps. And even, President Trump himself said in trashing Massie, he said he's not a libertarian. In other words, I think that, and maybe this is part of your point, that Trump isn't trying to distance himself from libertarians. He's just trying to get rid of Thomas Massie.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I was always a Vivek Ramaswamy supporter. I was so inspired by Vivek when he ran for president as a Republican. I initially supported him over Trump as the ideal candidate because he was the only candidate as a Republican he showed up to Ron Paul's events. He met with Ron Paul. He called himself a nationalist libertarian, which inspired me to write my own manifesto. I called the Libertarian Nationalist Manifesto. I don't know if it'll have as much impact as what you're planning for Freedom Fest this year, which I'm looking forward to hearing about what you're doing. And I can't wait to see you in July. I think I'll probably be treated like a leper at Freedom Fest this year because if you go back, I know this is not interesting to a lot of people, but for my audience, they probably care. But for about the last 6 to 8 months, I was kind of saying, hey, this is coming. You better prepare for this. Massie's probably going to go down because of this ill-fated war with Trump. Yep. When we go to Freedom Fest in July of this year, and you and I are sitting on stage and talking to a group of libertarians, most of those people are going to be big Thomas Massie fans. Yep. What lessons will we have learned from this that you would want to impart to that audience this summer?
That you don't have to put libertarianism on the counter and slash it up, hack it to death, just for the sake of making your point. If you're going to go into politics, could it kill you to, be a little bit politic? Do you really need, you put your finger right on it just now when you characterized it as his ill-fated war with the president. If you're going to war with the president of the United States, it's very likely you're going to have a bad day. And I think that that's the biggest lesson. This wasn't really about any ideology. If anyone picks a fight inside the party or outside the party, but especially inside the party, picks a fight with the head of the party and finds no room for compromise and then tolerates an exaggerated level of discourse, right, to your point, you're going to have a bad day. And I think that that's the lesson at the end of the day. I don't think that the folks at Freedom Fest should feel cowed in any sense ideologically. The president doesn't have a problem with libertarian. The president ran as a libertarian in many respects in 2024. We can all argue about the extent to which he's left behind certain promises. I think a lot of us are frustrated with the president. I think that we should be frustrated with a lot of what has happened in the Trump administration. But that doesn't mean that the president is per se going after libertarians.
No, I still think that is it better, Mike, to be not a libertarian who sometimes does libertarian things, or to be a pure libertarian who never does?
I think it's good to be a libertarian who frequently has to tolerate things that are not very libertarian. That's called America, right? That's called being in politics. That's called compromise and working hard and trying to make the world a better place. You don't have to call yourself something else.
Yeah, after I lost my U.S. Senate and my presidential runs back in 2016 and 2018, I did a lot of self-reflection. I've been working on myself, Mike. I think I realized that a lot of my problems were due to my own actions. It wasn't some outside conspiratorial force. And that the thing is that, people, when you lose an election, they'll call you a loser forever. But I've never adopted a loser mindset, Mike. And I actually feel like the problem is that too many libertarians are comfortable in losing. They prefer losing. Thomas Massie's loss last night confirms that he is a real libertarian now in many ways, because when libertarians win, Mike, if you're Javier Milei, Do you know what that does? It embarrasses people, Mike. Because some people have been working so hard and so long, ostensibly, to advance these ideas, and they have failed so frequently that if other people succeed, then it embarrasses them by proxy. So
I think that does happen from time to time. I would like to see Massie continue in politics in one fashion or another. It's not obvious that has to be running for office. It certainly doesn't mean he has to be running for any particular office. I would like to see him push the ideology, not only because I'm a big fan of the ideology, but because I think that there is a case to be made. I would like to see someone make the case I'm making today, which is the Republican Party is not against libertarianism. The president is not against libertarianism. People are mad at Thomas Massie. That's all it is. And so if Massie, and by the way, a lot of others, yourself included, myself included, push the ideology and get some traction, and don't act like losers to the point of Austin Peterson. He's exactly right, that guy. Sometimes Austin gets one right. You got this one right today. There's no reason to act like a loser. And being a leader and being a loser are two very different things.
Mike, you've got a big announcement to make this summer on July 8th at Freedom Fest. I'm really excited to hear. Talk to us about a little bit. I mean, tease us at least a little bit, if you're not going to give us the big announcement of what we have to come this summer.
I think that it's important for us to recognize that the way that we do certain things in the United States politically are dopey. I don't think anyone is going to disagree with that as a general proposition. There are a couple of them that bother me in particular, and I'm going to go after one of them. I'm going to go after it in a very hard way, and I'm going to try to change the way that we do things. And along the way, I'm going to make the case that one of the reasons why you should believe in some of the change I'm talking about is because of libertarianism. It's not, you have to be a libertarian or you're not going to get it. It's, I'm not going to try to say the only people you can trust in this world are libertarians. Nothing so silly. But this is a set of libertarian ideas that we're going to be advancing, and at the same time changing certain processes and changing the way we do certain things. And we want to make that case inside the Republican Party. I do believe firmly that the Republican Party is where the debate is going to matter in American politics over the next several years.
Mike, you're a good man, and I like you, and I agree with you on a lot of things. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person for the first time this summer at Freedom Fest. Thank you so much.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you there too, Austin.
Yeah, people who want to join us at Freedom Fest can do so. Head over to the website, Freedom Fest 26. You can use my code 4, the number 4, Liberty 100 if you want to get $100 off of your regular attendee or VIP full pass. Hang out with the VIPs. That's me and my buddy Mike. Have a good one, Mike. We appreciate you very much.
You have a good one.
Here's a clip from several months ago on this show. I don't know about you, John, but I'm a Republican. I don't think the president is a child predator, and I don't really appreciate all the insinuations that he is from Massie people. And also, I think I should be allowed to criticize Thomas Massie. So I mean, there's a bit of the lunatic fringe that has attached itself to Massie that I think he would do better. So if he loses, I hope that he learns a little bit from Donald Trump, because I think Trump has figured out a way to sort of clean house effectively while also building broad coalitions. And that's one thing that we've got to work on, because if we don't change, nothing changes, John. If we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to continue to lose. I hope we win, but it's about more than just one politician and getting them reelected. There's a bigger, broader set of ideals that we're all fighting for, right? That's right. These ideals are bigger than any one man, more important than any one loss. Thomas Massie is going to go home to his farm, and the Liberty Movement's going to spend this week arguing about who's to blame. Some of them are going to blame Trump. Some of them are going to blame AIPAC. Some of them are going to blame the money, right? And those things are real, and they contributed to it, sure. But none of them are the full story, right? The whole story is harder, and it's worth telling. The whole story is that the cause of liberty is more important than any one man. It's worthy of candidates who are connected to reality, who not only just know how to win, but know how to be proper human beings. who know how to live in a society. Because after all, do we not live in a society? I think we do. The hardest thing in the world to do is to look at defeat and not just ask what was done to us, but what we did to ourselves. And the cause is not finished. The cause is fragile. The cause of individual liberty and constitutional government deserves an honest accounting of what happened. This cause is older than any one congressman, right? And we have to ask ourselves if what happened last night is the end. Is it the black pill? Are we not going to vote our way out of this? Well, I disagree. Right? These ideas have outlasted Reconstruction. They've outlasted the Civil War. They've outlasted the New Deal and the Great Society and every expansion of federal power. People in between the Calvin Coolidge and the Ronald Reagan administrations must have felt like they were never going to get out of the darkness. I'm sorry, but I disagree. There is a brighter future. To every Peterson's Patriot this morning who watched, who stayed with me as I suffered the slings and arrows of outrageous fortunes in the last 6 months, for those of you like Jennifer who listened to what I said and vehemently disagreed, but still said Austin's on the right track. For those of you out there who are a member of this crew, the For Liberty Network, thanks for getting my back. Because you see out there me telling these people what was coming. You saw me predicting what was coming and what was going to happen last night, and you stuck with me. We will be the vanguard of the new libertarian nationalist movement that will take over government one day to leave everyone alone. But it's only going to happen if you believe it's possible. We will not sit and preside over a managed decline of the liberty movement, and we sure as hell won't do it with our country, America the Beautiful. We'll be back tomorrow. This is the Wake Up America show, and that's on the For Liberty Network. By you, for you.
Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. George Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com. George Washington.